Today, I'm going to be going over the top 5 most important metrics that you guys should be looking out for in a trading system or in your current trading system to better optimize your system and strategy to make more P&L and profits for 2025. Now, you can use these metrics as a way to compare your system to other traders, or what's most important is looking at these metrics to determine whether your system is profitable or not, as well as which specific areas of your trading system you guys really want to optimize and focus on. Because if you see my other video, I made a video on how you can scale your accounts and your P&L especially, and there are two main methods you guys know. First one is to just compound your account, which leads to you risking more money amount per trade, or the other option, which is a smarter option, is to optimize your system through journaling, backtesting, and improve these metrics. So that's why I'm making this video on the important metrics of a trading system, so you guys can work on these metrics through backtesting and your technical analysis to try to make these metrics in your favor as much as possible. So to get straight into it, it's mainly 5 most important metrics. The first one, you guys should already know what it is. It's pretty brain dead, but win rate. All this is purely raw, how often you're winning compared to losing. It's just a percentage of your winners versus your losers. Don't need much more explanation there. In terms of importance, the reason why we want to look at win rate is because win rate typically entails losing streaks. So the higher your win rate, the less or smaller your losing streaks, and the less likely you will hit those losing streaks, right? Or drawdown, which is another term. So if someone has a 70% win rate, no matter what their risk to reward is, they will have a lot smaller losing streaks. And I'll show you guys an example of this later on in the video. But essentially, someone with a higher win rate system, they will have less losing streaks. Therefore, they will have less drawdown periods than someone that has a, for example, 30% win rate. So the 30% winner trader, their equity curve might look something like this. Let's say they're still positive, it might look something like this, right? Or maybe they just go down and draw down a lot more and then make it back up with their risk reward. But the 70% trader with a 70% raw win rate, they take smaller wins likely, but they face these drawdown periods a lot less often. Maybe this guy only has 2 drawdown periods versus this guy has 3 drawdown periods. So you can see, and I'll show you guys later of a Monte Carlo simulation, you'll see this basically play out. But win rate is mainly just important just for drawdown periods. And what my very big suggestion for you guys is, no matter your system, no matter how high your risk to reward is, because yes, risk to reward will compensate for your win rate and vice versa, right? Win rate can compensate for a low risk to reward, which is the next thing I was going to talk about. But essentially, no matter what your system is, you want to preferably have a win rate that is greater than or equal to 40%. And this is just due to psychology. Like I mentioned, it's just purely due to drawdown, right? The lower your win rate, the more likely you will experience long periods of drawdown. But not necessarily, I wouldn't say long periods of drawdown, but you'll definitely have a lot more losing streaks. So actually, yeah, sure, long periods of drawdown, that's how you want to think of it, right? Your equity curve is not going to be as smooth as someone with a higher win rate that's more stable. Even if you have high risk reward, with a lower win rate, your equity curve may look something like this, just because your winners are huge. However, you don't hit these winners often because of a low win rate. So that's why I mentioned preferably you would have a greater than or equal to 40% win rate. That's the preference, and that's most optimal, no matter what the situation is. So this here is actually a chart I wanted to show you guys regarding win rate. You can see this is just within a 50 trade period, so not many trades. So the bigger the trade period, obviously the more skewed these numbers are going to become, right? The higher probability you will face these probabilities within the red. But essentially what it is here is within 50 trades at a 40% win rate, you're likely to face you have a 51% chance of facing 8 losses in a row. Now the question I ask you guys is, Are you able to psychologically handle that? Are you able to not go on tilt and not change your system or change strategies or strategy hop if you're losing 8 in a row? A lot of people, what they do is they will go tilt, they'll blow the account. Either it's a fund account or a personal account, which is absurd. I'm gonna be honest, on a personal account, you should never be risking that much where 8 trades blows your account. But for funded, that does make sense, right? Potentially you can lose the entire account with just 8 losses in a row. And you have a literally 50-50 chance of hitting that drawdown of 8 losses in a row. Hence why I highly suggest everyone to have at least a 40% win rate if you are going to trade a system, because you can see you will have, even at like a 50% win rate, 50-50 odds, you still will have a basically guaranteed chance of hitting 6 losses in a row. And this is within 50 trades. So you could imagine, now this isn't exponential, so within a year, let's say you're taking 1 trade a day, a year has 252 active trading days. Let's just say 252. Let's say 250, right? Maybe you take 2 days off for break for some reason. If you do the math here, this is 5, but that doesn't mean you multiply 6 times 5 here equals 30. That doesn't mean you can face a 30 losing streak. No, this is, in terms of probabilities, this is not linear. So you can't just multiply like that. But the point is, for a trading system, if you're going to trade it for an entire year, you can expect to have slightly more losses than what's shown on this chart. So at a 50% win rate, you can potentially, within a whole year of trading, you can face potentially that 9 losing streak, right? So despite, even if you have a high win rate, you can still face these drawdown periods, and you need to understand the probabilities of that and the psychology that comes with that. Hence why, like I mentioned, preferably have a win rate greater than or equal to 40%. You can see if you have a 70% win rate or higher, this is when you're pretty safe from drawdown in terms of losing streaks. You typically won't really lose even within a whole year. It's very rare for you to lose like even, I'd say probably 6 trades in a row, right? It's very rare, very, very rare. But of course, you can see you could still lose 3 trades in a row with the 70% win rate. Even at 75%, you can still lose 3 in a row. So what I'm trying to say is, a lot of people I see online, they tilt, or they have problems managing the trades, and they just go tilt on like a 3 losing streak, which is absurd, right? And their trading system has like a 40 to 50% win rate. So if you're going on tilt after 3 trades and your system's at a 40 to 50% win rate, that's not good, because you can still face up to 8 to 9 losses or 10 losses in a row. So that's why for win rate, you want to keep track of that. You don't want a too low win rate. Now, average risk reward, I already talked about this, but basic risk reward is how much money you're risking and how much money you're making. So we want preferably anything above 1-to-1. I'd say the lowest risk reward I'd ever go for is 1-to-1, and I'll go over the math behind this later. And it's just due to EV, which is the next topic. But essentially, if you're like taking a trade and your average across like a huge sample size is your winners are 5 times bigger than your losers, then your risk reward ratio is 1-to-5. Your reward is 5, your risk is always at 1. So hopefully that makes sense there. That's important because the profitability or edge of a trading system is purely defined based upon these 2 metrics, the win rate and average risk reward, which gets into my next topic, which is expected value. And this is short for EV. Now, I know a lot of you guys probably see profit factor on especially like trading journal websites like TradeZella, things like that. I'm not a fan of profit factor, because what profit factor does, it just takes the gross profits divided by gross loss. So you see the ratio between your profits and loss, which is cool and all, but it's not raw, pure performance based. If you want raw, pure performance based metrics, that's when you go to expected value. Okay, so instead of profit factor where it goes off gross profits to gross loss, expected value is purely based on performance alone. And the formula for it, all it is your win rate times your average winner. But your average winner is not in terms of monetary value, it's in terms of risk reward. and then you subtract basically 1 minus your win rate, because you want to basically determine your losing rate, right? So if your win rate is 60%, your losing rate is going to be 40%. And you multiply this by your average loser risk reward, which is always going to be 1. So for example, let's say you have a trading system at 60% win rate and 2 risk reward. I said this is a solid trading system right here. 60% 2 risk reward is pretty solid, especially understanding that 90% don't make it or even break even. Break even is like top 10%. So if you're even have a profitable edge, you're basically top 5 or higher, of course, right? But nonetheless, this, if you do the math here, your win rate always turns into decimals, by the way. That's just how percentages work. If you don't know, your average winner is 2 risk rewards. So we just do 0.60 times 2, which is 1.20, and then we subtract the losing, which is 40%, and then this is also just multiplying by 1. So what happens is we end up with 1.20 minus 0.40, which is 0.80. So we have an expected value of 0.80 with this win rate and risk reward combination, and I'll go later in depth into what that exactly entails and means. But the next metric is max drawdown. But before we get into max drawdown, I'll actually explain this EV real quick. If you go to my website, let's see if I can pull it up here. If you go to my website, I'll put a screenshot real quick. Okay, so I basically got this screenshot from my website here, and all it is my expected value calculator. All you have to do is completely free, by the way, guys. All you have to do is just input your win rate and your risk reward of your average system, and it gives you expected value just based off this calculation or mathematical formula. You can do it yourself, or you can just use a calculator. It's much simpler and faster, and you can test out different win rates and risk reward combinations. And basically, you want to trade a system that has the highest expected value. That's pure net like performance of a system. Now, what does this number mean? Because a lot of people never understood what this number means. This number just means this is the factor in which your average trade expectancy results in. So, for example, if you have an EV of 1.0, which is an EV of 1 in your system, that means on average, after averaging out your winning trades and losing trades, factoring all that in, you will make 1 unit of return or risk per trade, or every trade you take. And this is equivalent to a 100%. This is equivalent to a 100% win rate system, basically. It literally is in terms of raw performance. All right, so here I basically got the screenshot from my website, and it's just a 100% win rate at 1-to-1 risk reward gives you expected value of 1. And again, all this means is you're winning, you're basically making a return equal to your risk on every single trade you're taking on average. So that's why I said earlier, a 60% win rate system at 2R is like good. It's close to that 100% win rate at 1-to-1. Now, the only difference is obviously 100% win rate at 1-to-1, you're never going to lose, hence you will never have any drawdown, while a 60% at 2R, you will have drawdown. In every single system, no matter what win rate, you will have drawdown, because it's, I'd say, okay, first off, it's impossible to have a 100% win rate, but even like 90% is extremely difficult to obtain. I personally have never been able to obtain it. Even 80% is pretty damn high up there. I'd say 70 to 75% range is very doable. But I think after you go past 80% into that 90% territory, it's extremely difficult with a risk reward of at least 1.0. But nonetheless, that's not too important here. Let's just do some math here. I'll show you guys real quick what I'm trying to say. If you don't understand that, what I meant by EV of 1.0 means on average you'll make 1 unit of risk per trade. So if you were risking, let's say your risk was 1K a trade, that means 1 RR, okay? So R is just your risk reward. And if your risk is 1K per trade, that means if you lose a trade, you're down 1 RR, also known as 1K. You're down 1K. It's the same meaning. Negative 1K. And so let's say you take 10 trades, and across 10 trades, you are trading a system of 100% win rate. It's not possible, by the way. I'm just saying, just theoretically for mathematical purposes here, you would make 10K because 1 times 10, right? You don't lose any trades. Now, if you do the same with 10 trades with the 60% at 2R system, which is a 0.80 expectancy, what would happen? You would have 6 times 2R, which is 2K, which is 12K, and then you subtract, you lose 4 trades, 40% of 10. So you subtract 4K. So then you end up with 8K. So you can see the two systems. One ends up with 10K, the other ends up with 8K. And this is really what the system is trying to say. The EV value is trying to say. With 10 trades, if you just do 10 trades times the EV, you end up with 10, right? For the 100% win rate system. And all you're doing is just 10 times your risk amount, which is 1K times 10. You end up with the same number. It's 10K. That means on average, you will make 10K across 10 trades, and you'll make on average 1K per trade. Now let's do the calculations for the second system. It would be literally 10 trades times expected value. In this case, expected value of the 60% at 2R is 0.80. So what happens here? You do, sorry, what am I doing? 10 times 0.80. And what does this get you? It gets you 8. Right? So you get 8 units of return here. Because, again, expected value, 0.80 is your average units of return after wins and losses. And then the 10 is just obviously 10 trades, right? So with 8 units of return, and your risk is 1K per trade, if you do just 8 times 1K, you end up with 8K. It's the same exact calculation, guys, here. So hopefully from this, you can understand what unit of returns really means, and what EV really entails, and why it is a much better indicator of a trading edge and performance of a system than profit factor. This is how the math is behind the scenes. Now, let's find something that has a 1.0 expectancy to show you guys something real quick. So this here is basically the closest that I could get to 1.0 expected value here. And it's obviously not with the 100% win rate. It's going to be a 60% at 2.4 average risk reward. It's about a 1.04, but we'll round to a 1.0. And literally, like I mentioned, if we did math here, all this means is we will basically have the same performance as a 100% win rate system. That's why it's so crucial and so good. If we do the math here, 10 trades, right? Again, same risk parameters as before. 60% win rate, you're winning 6 trades. And then obviously your average score is 2.4. So I gotta pull out a calculator real quick for this joint. So about 14K, 14.4K. And then you obviously lose 4 trades, so that's 4K. So you make about 10.4K. We'll round this down to 10K for the purpose of my explanation here. Now, you can do this with whatever numbers you like. Feel free to, but I'm telling you, this is how the math works behind it. Like if you find a different system that has also 1.0 expected value, then it's a really good system. But you can see essentially here, you end up with the exact same P now as someone with the same risk parameters trading a 100% win rate system, winning all 10 trades. They end up making 10K. You also end up making 10K, even though you don't have a 100% win rate. That's what I'm saying. is an EV value of 1.0 of any system is extremely good. The only difference, again, like I said, is just drawdown. That's it. So psychology, if you can stay disciplined and stick to a system, you have a killer system there. If I can find one more example real quick to show you guys something. Let's see. Okay, I found literally a perfect system here to use for this demonstration. Here's another one. Here we go. Here's a perfect example of how you don't need that 100% win rate to get basically 100% expectancy in terms of return per risk. This is another expected value of 1.0. And this is not with a 100% win rate. This is with a 40% win rate. So you're winning less often than a coin flip. But your risk reward is 4. So let's do the math here. 4 times 4 is reward. So you're making 4K. This equals 16K minus you lose 6 trades at 1K each. That's 6K. You end up with 10K again. So by this, hopefully you guys will now understand and see the probabilities here playing out in terms of mathematical probabilities and showing essentially how you end up with the same amount of money as someone that had a 100% win rate. Like, you could do this, if you don't believe this is true, I mean, you could literally do this across, if you want to do 50 trades, I mean, if you win all 50 trades, risking 1K per trade at 100% win rate, you make 50K, right? If you do 50 trades with a 40% win rate, we'll probably calculate it again for this. You win 20 trades. You win 20 trades times your risk per risk reward, which is 4K, is how much you're making per trade. That's 80K minus the rest of the 50 minus 20 to 30 trades, which is times 1K each. So that's 30K. You end up with 50K. Like, I don't think you guys understand this. You guys see this? You end up making the same amount still as someone with a 100% hit rate. But look at your stats. When someone looks at this without looking at expected value, understand what expected value means. Like, if they don't even know what this is, they look at this and say, oh, okay, it's an alright system. That's not true at all. This system is killer. It's killer. It's the equivalent to winning every single trade. As long as your psychology is intact and you're not tilting, revenge trading or things like that, following the system, it's a killer system to make hella money. Now, my system is about I think 1.8, but it does obviously variance from time to time, right? Because of their market conditions, and you just have to slightly adapt. I wouldn't say not even adapting strategy. It just will affect your stats, right? In a ranging market versus trending market, certain strategies will change ever so slightly, but it hovers around that 1.8. So that's about basically, I'm averaging about 1.8 times my risk per trade. So in terms of monetary value, or not monetary, but in terms of just pure performance, yes, my system is better than a system that has a 100% win rate at 1-to-1. Except it doesn't have the pros of having no drawdown at all, right? It's the only difference. And of course, 100% you would be able to full pour every trade, but obviously you can't do that or compound that well with a lower win rate system. So there's that. But if we were to put in my system, we'll do this as an example, guys. Let's take my current stats right now. Let's see what my current stats are real quick. Let me check real quick. All right, so here is from my trading journal here with my stats from 2024 to 2025. I have not updated this for this month because I've been focusing a lot mainly on working on my little bit of my algo, but also my trading indicators for TradingView. Been having different variations or versions and been constantly publishing updates to them to make them better, include more functionality for y'all. So that's all included in the all-in-one indicator ETU package. But again, nonetheless, here are my stats from 2024. I think it was mid-2024 when I started using this journal template here. And of course, I have the EV value automatically calculated based on the formula here within the journal template. And of course, this is given to all the private mentorship students, the journal template, with all the programs and functionalities coded already. So you don't have to worry about a single thing. You just have to follow the template. but nonetheless, it's about a 66% win rate at a 3.6 risk reward across how many trades did that take? This is about 487 trades. So let's just round these numbers so it's easier to calculate here. For the win rate, we'll round the win rate down to a, if we go down to 60%, okay, so we'll round the win rate down to a 60%, and we'll keep the risk reward at a 3.6, so it's easier to calculate here for this. We'll compare this real quick with 50. Yeah, we'll compare with the 50 trades, whatever. So 50 times, so we need 60% of 50. It should come out as a good number. So that's 30. So with my system, I'm winning 30 trades, right? So I'm winning 30 trades, and my average risk reward is 3.6. So it's about 3.6K. Okay, this is not going to be even, but should be fine. It'd be 108K, and then obviously we're losing 20 trades times 1K, 20K. So that is about 88K. So comparing my system to a system of, what did we say this was? I think we said this was a 60% at 2, or 40% at 4 sword average here, which is equivalent to the same output of an EV value 1.0 of a 100% win rate system. And then comparing my system next to it, I'll make about, let's do the math here real quick. 88 divided by 50. I make about 76% more in terms of monetary value and just in terms of proportions to the risk unit trading my current system or my current strategy I show y'all. So hopefully here, this basically shows you guys how well it works with what I teach. And yeah, so now you should be able to understand what EV is from this demonstration here. We'll go on to the next section now, since EV should be fully covered here, but basically understand EV is the average, on average, how much you will make per unit of risk on every trade. And I'll keep this here in case you guys want to screenshot this. We'll delete this. That's profit factor. Doesn't matter. We'll also delete that. We'll keep it here. And this is 100% win rate 1R system. And then I'll just label all this. If you guys are curious, this is 40% win rate. 4R, so you guys can screenshot this. This was, what is this, 60% at 3.6 risk reward? I think the, hold on, let's see what the expectancy was real quick for 60% at 3.6 risk reward. Okay, so it was about a 1.76 basically for the EV value of my system. So that makes sense. Oh, it's across 50 trades. So it's 50. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. I was just doing the math here. All it is, just to make sure everything I did here was correct, just 50 times 1.76, which is the average unit of return, or average return I'm making per unit of risk as a factor, and then you multiply it by what the actual monetary amount is of that per unit, which is 1K. So yeah, makes sense. My calculations here are correct. It's 88K. Okay. Next up is max drawdown. And this is very important because this determines how much you risk per trade. So next thing would be risk management. Now this isn't a direct metric, I'd say, in terms of performance. It is, but it's not something it's something that's changeable in terms of you can decide like on go whenever you want to change this, but you want to keep it consistent, right? You obviously want to keep your risk management as consistent as possible. And what I recommend is 1% per trade on personal live accounts. So if you're on a personal live account, risk 1% per trade. And if you're on a funded, I'd risk 1/10 of max drawdown. So always go on based off max drawdown for funded accounts or prop firms. Don't go off account size, because not every prop firm has the same max drawdown, and max drawdown is truly what matters in prop firms. It's not the account size. So yeah, that's my recommendations. By the way, if you're on a personal versus a funded, and of course on a personal, your risk will slowly decrease as time goes by. So like for example, if you're on a small personal account, you might start up with risking 5% per trade. If that's okay with you, and you're okay with the drawdown that comes with that, but then you will slowly, as your account gets bigger and bigger, you don't need to risk as much to make the same amount, if not more. So then you end up from 0.25 to 1%. So it really varies, really varies. But up to a certain point, there's just no need really to risk continuously 1%, especially if you're able to make way more than you need comfortably while helping your psychology, because at that point you're seeing like huge numbers, 6 figures, potentially even in a single trade. And if that's the case, then you obviously wouldn't want to be risking 1% every single time, right? You would have lower risk to be comfortable with those numbers. But yeah, that's my risk management recommendation for prop firms and personal accounts. And I recommend to keep that risk consistent. Don't change it until you want to start scaling up. But don't ever go up in risk percent. That's the general rule. You can go down in risk percent if you're scaling your account, right? But don't go down in risk percent if you lose 1 or 2 trades. So if you're losing like within normal deviation, standard deviations of your losing streak, based on the chart I showed earlier from FTMO of the win rate percent, you shouldn't be decreasing your risk just because you're in a losing streak, because that will make it harder to come out of the losing streak. So hopefully that makes sense here. But max drawdown and risk management are tied together, and the reason why is because you want to see the max drawdown in every system, and then from there you determine what your risk management will truly be optimally. So from here, I think we should go to, let me see, I'll get a screenshot real quick from this website here. Okay, perfect. So I got these 2 screenshots from the Monte Carlo simulation website that I've showed in my previous videos. I don't have the exact link on top of my head right now, but you guys can go back to those videos if you want to find the exact link. But nonetheless, I have 2 systems that we were actually discussing earlier in the video. We have the 40% win rate here at 4 risk reward average. Or sorry, this is not 40%, was it? Yeah, no, it was. Okay. And then here is a 60% win rate system at 2R average. And for these 2, this is gonna be 1 trade per day. So 20 trades a month, and this is based upon 1 year of mathematical trading data for the systems. And what are 2 things that stand out to me most here? Well, you want to look at this number here. Max drawdown percent. This is extremely important for any system that you want to develop or trade. So you can see how at a higher win rate, your max drawdown is a lot lower than a system with a lower win rate. It's almost half of the max drawdown. And you can also see that correlates with the max consecutive losses here, right? You only have 7 max losses in a row at 60% win rate across 1 year, taking 1 trade a day, versus 12 consecutive losses with a 40% system at 4 risk reward, which is a lot. 12 losses in a row is a lot. And now people will switch their system or strategy hop probably even after the 7 losses, right? But they don't understand that's part of the probabilities, and that's actually normal in this case. It's not normal if you go against your strategy and you reach 7 losses in a row, but it's normal if you're following your system and you reach 7 losses in a row. Now, obviously, if you're constantly reaching 7 losses in a row every single week, that is not normal. This is a max amount, not average consecutive losses. Remember, this is max, right? And your max wins are also shown here, but we don't care too much about looking at the max wins. We want to look at the max losses, but most importantly, like I said, the max drawdown. The max losses is just a good number to look at to see how much psychology tolerance you have towards losing that number. So if you know you're not able to, you basically want to see if you can psychologically handle losing 12 in a row. If the answer to that is yes, then sure, stick to the system that has the higher result balance. This system here we calculated earlier has I think this was the 1.0 EV system here. This here was the 0.8 EV system here. So let me write that here so you guys can see this. So you can clearly see, because the system on the left, even though it has a lower win rate, it has a higher risk reward, and that combination just happens so to give you a higher expected value. Therefore, you make more money trading this system. This system outperforms the other system, but at what cost? The cost is basically your psychology and drawdown. You face more drawdown and more losses in a row. Now the question is, can you handle that? Yes or no? If you can handle this psychologically, then choose this system. But if you know you cannot handle 12 losses in a row or negative 11% drawdown, max drawdown of your total account, by the way, then pick this system, because this is for the better for your psychology. Because what happens to a lot of people is you pick the system. Some people, they always pick the system that performs the best, which obviously it makes sense on paper, right? Typically you want to pick the system that obviously performs the best. However, if two systems have very similar performances that aren't too far apart, you want to pick a system that fits best your psychology, because what tends to happen with people is, let's say you picked a better system here. However, the better system has these cons of more drawdown. What happens is this trader here that picks this system, if they can't handle this drawdown, they can go on like 20 losing streaks because they go on tilt, they revenge trade, or they start over leveraging, and full porting and all that everything just goes out. The risk management goes out the window for them. Hence, it's better for those type of people to pick the higher win rate system that may not give you as much return because this has a lower expected value, but you won't be going on tilt and full porting and things like that because you're mentally able to handle that drawdown. So hopefully that right there makes a lot of sense. If it doesn't, I don't know what to say. But yeah. But if the system here, for example, let's say this system here has a 0.30 expected value versus a 1.0, then in this case, I would suggest to try to adapt your psychology, or just become mentally stronger, man, and just trade this system, just because that's a 3 times difference, a bit more than 3 times difference in performance, in raw performance, and that's a huge difference. Especially as you compound it and look at it through the lens of several years, that times 3 every single year is gonna go a very long way. Like across 3 years, you'd be at 3 for this system. Across 3 years for this system, you'd be at 9. Okay, so it's a very big difference. But like I said, when the EV value is somewhat close, like these two, 0.8 and 1.0, it's like a 20% increase, so not a huge, substantially like life-changing difference. Then I'd suggest, like I said, to pick the system that best fits your psychology, right? Now, the best situation, of course, would be if you had 2 systems and the best system had the highest EV and it had the best limited drawdown, meaning it has the least amount of drawdown. Then obviously that's the best case scenario. Obviously it's a win-win there, but it's not always going to be that case. Like you said here, if you're looking at this without looking at the result balance here, a lot of people would immediately assume this system here makes more money because the drawdown is less, but they're not looking at other stuff like the risk reward, which matters. So hopefully that sums it up about risk management and basic max drawdown and how truly important those 2 things are. These 2 are actually, I need to include one more thing here before if you guys want to take a screenshot. This is risking 1% per trade. These both are risking 1% per trade. Now, let me show you something else. Okay, so for this, I'm going to delete this from the screenshot because it's not going to fit, but just real quick temporarily, this is what happens when you double your risk on the 40% win rate at 4 risk reward system, or any system. Look at the drawdown difference now. Instead of a max drawdown of 11%, you're now facing a max drawdown of 21%. That's double the amount of drawdown, and you basically doubled your risk here. It's not 100% linear, but it's basically gonna be like this, right? So this is why I say risk management is gonna be a metric that you want to fit to your data. So all depends. The first thing all you have to do is ask yourself, what's the max drawdown that you can handle psychologically and financially? If the answer is 30% max drawdown, then yes, to get the most optimal returns in your trading system, you would want to risk 2% per trade. Same system, you're just risking 2% per trade. Again, this ties into the previous video I made about how to scale your profits. It's the same exact reason. You just have to risk more in terms of percent, not risk more money. It's risking more percent of the count. We're looking at percent, we're not looking at the exact money. So then yes, you would want to pick 2% risk to get the most optimal return. But let's say your most tolerance is only minus 15% drawdown. Then I'd say, yeah, go with the 1% risk per trade and just let time play out. Maybe trade the system for a few years and you'll get there, right? Because this is the drawdown you can expect with 1% per risk. But as soon as you double that risk, your drawdown is basically doubled here for your max drawdown. But look at something that's important here. Your max losses, consecutive losses, does not change at all. That has no correlation to your risk percent per trade. Your risk percent per trade only affects basically result balance and obviously return percent, duh, but max drawdown percent. So that's definitely something you want to keep in mind. So basically now, before I end it there, my personal suggestion for like how to determine your risk percent per trade, obviously going off max drawdown percent, right? But essentially my recommendation for max drawdown is you want to keep it around negative 20% to negative 25% is your max. And remember, this is across a year. So obviously the more training days you're taking, more training sample size, the max drawdown will increase ever so slightly along with the return percent. But again, my recommendation is gonna keeping it around negative 20 to negative 25% max drawdown, because I think that's where psychologically you could handle it. It really depends also on account size. If you have a massive account, this could be a good amount of money, right? I mean, a fourth is a good amount of money for a very big account. So all it depends, again, on your stats and your risk percent per trade. But like I said, especially if you're starting out just now or you have a mid-size account, I'd stick to the negative 20 to negative 25% max drawdown rule. This doesn't mean every time you go and drawdown, you're losing a fourth of your account though. Remember, this is max drawdown. So your average drawdown could only be maybe minus 10% here. But the most drawdown, the lowest point of your equity curve is going to be that negative 20 to negative 25%. So what can you take with this information I gave you? Basically, just pick a risk percent per, use the website, and then pick a risk percent per trade with your trading system stats that would net you a max drawdown that's going to be around negative 20 to negative 25%. And then you stick with that risk percent. That's going to be a risk percent you pick. Now, you don't have to obviously stick with that rule. That's just my personal suggestion on what I'd like to do to optimize returns while keeping, risk stable, right? But that's basically it for this today. There's nothing much I think I need to talk about here. You guys can take a screenshot here if you'd like. But that's it for this. Hopefully you guys did enjoy, and I'll see y'all in the free Discord.